Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Mike from moboxgraphics.com, and in this video tutorial, I'm just going to be recreating a motion graphic, of course, but it's a material design kind of music app. So back when Google announced material design, I think it was in 2014 or something, or maybe 2012, they showed off a music app that never came out. So their music app that doesn't use any of these animations, but it was a really cool animation, and I was like, man, that's so awesome. So I wanted to recreate it, and I'm going to do so right now in After Effects. So it's kind of a mix between Spotify and the app that they kind of demoed. So I don't think this is something that you're going to maybe follow along with. I don't think it's, it's not focused in any particular type of, tutorial, but it's really just watch it and you'll pick up some things along the way. So let's just jump right into After Effects here. And you might notice that I kind of changed up my workstation a little bit. I added, these two windows were down here in this effects control. I just expanded it out because I didn't really need too much more space here. So it kind of gives me more room for buttons. So this is a motion tool script. You can get it at mountmograph.com. It's like 35 bucks or something. It's not mine. I don't own it. I'm not sponsored by it, but it's just a really awesome tool. Go get it. It's super useful. I'm going to be using it in this tutorial. And this is the Align tool, which is built in After Effects. If you don't have it, go to Windows, Align, and you could just pin it there. Down here, I have the project panel, which I already have some artwork added, and then the effects and presets. So the artwork that I have here is I have some album artwork. I have a screen comp. I have a Spotify screenshot, and then I have my tutorial here. And then with some icons, I have a top and bottom pre-built Android type style bars, navigation bars, an iPhone mockup, and an arrow. So it's not really too important right now. You'll see kind of where they come into play, but it's just to kind of speed up the tutorial. So let's just create a background layer here. Layer new. I need to make sure I select this comp. Layer new solid. 2560 by 2560 is the size of my comp. And I'm going to make it kind of an off-white. On my second monitor, I do have some colors. If you're actually curious kind of what I'm basing this off of, I had done this once before, and I'm just kind of using this as a base. So I will be kind of pulling colors from that from time to time. So okay, so now we have our kind of off-white background. I'm just gonna rename this to background. And I'm gonna lock this layer so I don't accidentally drag it or pull it. And now I'm going to create a new solid, but I'm going to make it the size of a screen. So an Android screen or iPhone screen. It's the 16 by 9. The new screens aren't 16 by 9. A lot of them are 2:1 or 1:2 and 16 by 10. So, or 18 by 9 or something. I don't know. But anyways, that's not important. What's important is we're going to create a layer new solid. And we're going to change the width to 1080 and the height to not apostrophe. We want it to be 1920. And I'm just going to make it some arbitrary red color just so I could see it and it pops on screen nicely. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up to my effects and presets, and I'm going to search for drop shadow. It just so happens that since I've done this already, drop is already searched. But if you didn't do that, just type in drop, and down here you'll see drop shadow. I'm just going to apply it to this. And this is, again, not an important aspect of this. This is just to make it look better for when I showcase it. So my direction, I'm going to make it 180, so that way the light looks like it's pointing directly down. And then I'm just going to increase the softness, maybe increase the opacity a little bit, maybe increase the distance, softness, and that looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to add a fill to this because I don't like the red. I'm just going to search here, fill, and drag it on. And I'm going to change the color to white. Actually, I'm going to make it kind of I'm actually going to do the dark theme that I did. When I originally did this tutorial, I didn't really love the dark theme, but I think I like it now. So what you notice here is that when I make this red, for example, the drop shadow is also red. So what you can actually do here is in this effects panel, the effects control panel for this layer, you can drag the drop shadow underneath the fill. And that way, when it is red, it still maintains the black dark drop shadow. So just so you know, you can rearrange these and it does make a difference. So, okay, so now I have my phone screen, and in my project panel here, I'm just gonna open up my icons folder. And I have these pre-built because it speeds up the tutorial, but I'll show you kind of what they are. So I've got a bottom bar and I have a top bar. So these are basically just shape layers with transparency. There's no animation here. That's the reason why I didn't show you how to do this. But you can see here that it's just a couple shape layers with some transparency here. I think the transparency is on 40 for both, but since this layer is on top of this layer, this is probably like 80% transparency. So yeah, you could just make this however you'd like, because it's kind of not part of the tutorial, not an important aspect of the tutorial. I'm just going to use these pre-built ones. So you notice here that I moved the anchor point to the top and I drug it up and snapped it to the top of the app. I use this tool here to move the anchor point, but if you don't have the tool, you can just press Y on the keyboard and move the anchor point to wherever you'd like. I just like it at the bottom. That way it snaps to the bottom of the sheet nice and easily. So we already kind of look like we already have an app, which is pretty cool. So I'm just going to lock all of these layers just so I don't move any of them. These are all going to be pretty static. So coming up next here, I'm going to need to add the album artwork. So I'm just going to open up my album folder here, and I'm just going to drag in my album artwork, snap it to the center. Again, move the anchor point to the top so I could easily snap it. Again, press Y on the keyboard and just drag it up. And now I'm going to move this to the top. And I already know that this is the size, but if you didn't know, my size is 90, but you could always just kind of grab the corners here. And if you hold Shift, it scales it linearly in all directions. So you could just kind of line it up. I think 90 works good for me. And I'm just going to drag it underneath the navigation bars. So I kind of like this effect. Google hasn't really followed through with this, but basically the nav bars are on top of the artwork underneath. I get why it would maybe be annoying because part of these lettering and stuff is underneath this, but I really just like that transparency look. So I think next I'm going to create the navigation button. So it's actually called a FAB button or a FAB button. And basically I'm going to have the button kind of drop down and scale up and make this whole bottom kind of a single color. So just like the animation that Google showed. So I'm just going to create a new ellipse here. Holding Shift, I'm just going to, let's see. There's a way to make the anchor point in the center of the object, and I'm not too sure how you do it. I'm just going to mess around here with the different buttons. And I don't know how to do it. So I'm just going to create a circle. Holding Shift keeps it kind of perfectly circle, and then I'm gonna move the anchor point to the center of it. Y on the keyboard, drag it, or again, I could use my tool, and then I'm just gonna move this FAB button over there. So again, I just kind of snapped it, made sure it's snapped to the bottom of this artwork. So coming up next here, I'm gonna need to make that FAB button a color that kind of is pulled from this top layer. But first, I should probably rename this to FAB button. And I'm going to just pick the color picker here and just try to pick a color that is a really good accent. I tried pulling these like reds, but I don't think they look all that great as main colors because again, this FAB button will be kind of expanding out to the bottom of the screen. I will pick the yellow color for right now, but I'll probably change it. The reason why I'm picking the yellow color is just so you could better see me animating on this darker background. So I'm just going to create the first animation here real simply by setting a position keyframe. So press P on the keyboard and set a scale keyframe, S on the keyboard, and then press U on the keyboard. Maybe this will take a second and a half. I can always change it later. I'm just going to drag this down about here and scale this up until it covers all of the black. So I'm no good at using this graph editor. But if you are good at using the graph editor, you select these keyframes, you open the graph editor, and you want something that kind of looks like that. But because both of these are separate, it's kind of hard to make them perfectly match. This is why I hate the graph editor, because I can never get it to really match. I think that looks okay, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tool up here, and this will be an easy in, or an easy in. So on the graph editor, it kind of looks like this. So I'll show you kind of what this tool does. That would be an easy ease. This would be an easy out, and this would be to be honest, I don't know the difference easy in and easy out. I just know that the graphs look different. It slowly, it moves fast and then it moves slower. Just like that. So coming out of the graph editor here, I'm actually just going to kind of delay this a little bit. And I think that I could just probably move these keyframes over. I think that a second and a half is probably too long. But I basically want this to kind of fall down and pop up. But I don't really like how it's going straight to the center. I kind of want it to look a little more dynamic, kind of have like maybe an arc here. The reason why it's not arcing and the reason why I don't have any kind of Bezier handles is I actually need to just select these keyframes, right click, go to keyframe interpolation, and change this to auto Bezier. And now I have my handles here, which I'll just pull this one straight down and pull this one straight to the right. And now you have something that kind of looks like this. So I think that I need to maybe make this start expanding right there. See what that looks like. That looks pretty good. I'm just gonna press J on the keyboard to bounce around my keyframes. And I think I can maybe move this over even more. Then I'll need to continue to scale it up just to make sure all the corners are hit. So that looks pretty good, but of course it's expanding outside of the app. So this red solid here, which is my app background, I'm just gonna duplicate this layer, delete the drop shadow, move the anchor point to the bottom, and then I'm just gonna scale it down. Just so you can see it better, I'm gonna change the color to like red. And I need the scale to be up top. All right, I should probably put it above the fab button as well. So I need it to show the FAB button. Make sure the track matte style is alpha matte. Basically what that does is it'll, wherever this red shape is, I'll be able to see the fab button. Wherever the shape is not, I won't be able to see the fab button. So at this point, I need the scale to be there. So I'm just gonna set a keyframe right here. Why don't we just move that keyframe over? At this point, I'm gonna need this scale to be just at the artwork. So you see that it cuts off the FAB button and it fits perfectly. So let's take a look at that in regular speed. And that looks pretty good. I do think I maybe moved this FAB button over a little too much. I'll keep it there, but I'll bring it down. I don't know, it's just kind of experimental. However you want to do it, doesn't really matter. But what I do need is I actually need to put this FAB button beneath the top and bottom bars. That way I get the nice bottom bar there still. And as you can see, the coloration on this FAB button is absolutely atrocious. So I'm gonna kind of try to mess around here and see if I find a nice light color that I like. And it doesn't have to be exactly from the photo, but it certainly helps kind of maintain a singular look. Kind of purple looks kind of cool, but I kind of like sticking to these like blues. And I think that looks pretty cool. I might just make the color a little bit darker, but kind of maintain that same coloration. Yeah, I messed it up. That actually looks like a nice color right there. Okay, so now we're cooking with fire, if you know what I mean. Oh wow, what I just noticed is that this FAB button does not have a drop shadow, so I should probably add a drop shadow to that. Just go down here, search for drop shadow in my effects presets panel. Make sure, again, this is set to 180, so that way the shadow is coming directly from the top, and I'm just gonna increase the softness here. And maybe the distance. Just like that. That looks pretty cool. And now it's time to add the, the album information or the song list or whatever. So that'll be real simple actually. So one thing actually what I'm gonna need to is also have a play button, but I'll mess with that later. So I'm just gonna add some text here. ODESZA is the name of the group. Increase the size here. Personally, I like big lettering, but you do you, man. I do have the paragraph set to left align, which is good. And I'm just going to just start, whoops, press S on the keyboard. Would it maybe make the text have a little bit more spacing? And so I'm gonna have the name of the group. I'm gonna duplicate this layer by hitting Control D. And I'm gonna put the name of the album. I think it's A Moment. If I know how to spell, hopefully I spelt that right. It'd be really embarrassing if I didn't. Change the distance between the letters. Let's make the anchor point assigned to the left. Just gonna move this up. All right, so that looks pretty good already. Now I'm just gonna add a few songs here. Maybe first I'll add a line here. I just changed the stroke color to black. Maybe make the transparency 50%. Because I don't want these lines to be that noticeable. I just want them to kind of be a little bit of an accent. Center up the anchor point here, center up this object into the center of the layer. So in case you would actually mess it up and drew it over there, you could easily center it up using the align tool. And I'm just going to duplicate this layer a few times. I should probably bring up my grid here just so I could see what I'm doing. So I can make sure these are spaced out correctly. I like that spacing there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was pretty close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just like that. Now I'm going to get rid of my grid. I'm actually going to save this, Control S, just to make sure it doesn't crash on me. So from here, I kind of like these, but I'm going to use my tool again to change the name. You can go individually here, right-click, rename to all of them, but that takes a little bit too much time for me. I'm just going to use my tool. This will automatically rename these to lines, which is exactly what I want. And now I'm going to add some song names. I'm just going to duplicate this layer here. Duplicate this layer again. And I'm just eyeballing this. You can make it perfect if you'd like. I'm just pulling up the song list. Whoa, don't want to be there. Now, let's see. Again, I'm just pulling these titles from the song list from the album. One more. What song am I missing? Line of Sight, Late Night. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm just gonna grab all these and maybe move them over a tad and maybe put some numbers here. That might look cool. I'm just gonna select all these and just duplicate them. Not move that layer over. In fact, I'm going to lock that background because I have no good reason to be dragging around the background. So, I'm just gonna reverse what I just did. I don't know if I messed something up, so I'm just gonna lock the app background there. Duplicate these layers, kind of move them so that way they're all on one line. Drag it over. And now I'm just going to change the text here. And again, because it's aligned to the left, everything's kind of lined up perfectly. And you could even go here and add the, you know, how long the song is. I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so now what am I going to do when this fab button comes down? This is where kind of layering the orders of the layers kind of probably makes the biggest difference. So I'm actually going to, how do I want to do this? I'm just going to make the FAB button cover everything except for the information that I don't want it to cover, if that makes any sense. It probably didn't. So these lines, for example, these 1, 2, 3s, all I want to keep is the line of sight. I don't need moment apart. Move all of these underneath the FAB button. And now when it comes, it'll, you know, cover all that stuff up, which is cool. And now I can come here to this FAB button, press U on the keyboard, see my animations, and I can line up some animations. So for this line of sight and this Odessa, let me pull up my reference, see what I did. I don't remember. Okay, I'm just gonna press P on the keyboard. Set keyframes, press S on the keyboard because I'll scale and position them, and then press U on the keyboard to pull up all my keyframes. Come down here, hit J, and then it'll snap to that point. And now I'm gonna line these up. So I'm gonna center up this anchor point now. I don't need to use it at the end anymore. See, I hope that doesn't mess anything up. It totally does. So I'm gonna move the anchor point. So if I move the anchor point at a different point in time, it'll move the shape. I'm pretty sure if I move the anchor point now, it won't move the shape, and it doesn't. So that's exactly what I want. So since I already have all this stuff lined up, I don't need the anchor point to be on the edge. I'm just gonna press K on the keyboard until I bounce to these keyframes. K is a keyboard shortcut to bounce between keyframes. And oh man, I forgot to hit scale, set scale keyframes. So I'm just gonna set scale keyframes here. Again, press U on the keyboard, pull up all my keyframes. I'm gonna have to move that scale keyframe back though. So, okay, I have to pull this one back too. So I'm gonna need this Odessa to scale down. And I'm gonna move this line of sight song name there. I'm just gonna scale it up. Just like that. And I think I'm gonna do the same thing as I did before. I'm just gonna highlight these keyframes, right click, keyframe interpolation, auto Bezier. And it didn't do anything. Let's try that again for just the positions. There we go. You can only do it for the position keyframes. And just gonna kind of give it the same kind of smooth motion as the other one, as the fab button. And I'm gonna add the same type of motion. Again, I'll open up the motion graph. That's what you need it to look like. Again, this is why I use this tool, because that's a nightmare, but you can make these look like that. But again, it's the same motion as down there. So let's see what that looks like. So I kind of maybe don't want the motion to start right away because I'm getting some clipping. I don't want text to kind of overlap each other. Just for the sake of uniformity, I'll just roll up those keyframes next to each other. And I think that looks pretty good. Now, what else I'll do is I'm going to just take all of these things, press T on the keyboard, set transparency keyframes, come here and make these 0, maybe even move it up. And That way I do get some transparency, and it doesn't look like this text is just kind of moving by itself, if that makes sense. So that I don't want this text to look like it's moving while all of this is static. For some reason those didn't go to 0. And I mean, if you want, you could make them position down, so kind of roll off the screen. I don't know. Transparency is just kind of easier, to be honest. So I think that looks pretty good. So I like the way that looks a lot. And now I need the play button and pause button and the line for the length of the song. So to make this less of a cluster, I'm just going to highlight all of these, and I'm going to hit Control-Shift-C and just rename these to prefab list. It'll basically just combine all of it into one layer there. That way it's not all on the screen, because I like the way the animations look, except for that 4 for some reason it's not working. Just highlight all of them, press U on the keyboard. K on the keyboard bounces them to the end, and that 4 was set to 50%. And now it should work. And I think that I'm going to line these up there. So it all matches. And now we can start cooking with more fire. Now we can put the meat on the grill. I am going to make these have motion blur, and I should probably have done that before I pre-compose these. Make sure motion blur is set. Make sure these have motion blur. And they do. I'm pretty sure I set that already, so I'm not even going to check bottom bar. I'm pretty sure it has motion blur. In fact, I'm going to continuously rasterize that, and then I don't have to worry about anything. And again, I'm going to lock that layer. The album artwork I'm going to lock too, just because I don't really care about it now, as well as the fab button and the app background, which I'm going to rename to fab matte or mask. Okay. And a matter of fact, I could probably lock those layers too. Well, now everything's locked. Now I can't do anything. But that's okay, because it's time to add our play button, which you could do like that. That's a play button. Just use that. No, I'm just kidding. That would be terrible. If you come up here to Polygon tool and you press up and down on the keyboard, you can make a polygon of any size, but you need it to be 3. So just press the downward key on the keyboard, and I'm just going to hold Shift to kind of make sure it's aligned perfectly. And I think that looks good. I'll probably have to resize it, but that's okay. I'm going to make the stroke 0 and the fill white. So I'm going to move the anchor point to the center. I could have pressed Y and moved it, but that takes too much time. I'm going to rename this to the play and pause button, which if I'm smart, I would probably do this a little bit differently, which I will. So I'm just going to delete that. I don't need that. I'm going to go make a new composition. I'm going to make it 500 by 500. I'm going to turn the transparency on the background off. It's still transparent, but it just gives me a black grid instead. And I'm going to do the play button animation. So the play button I want to turn into a pause button, right? So because when you hit play on a play button, it turns to a pause button. So that way when you press it, it pauses. So I'm just going to center this up, again using the same exact tools and methods that I used to make it before. I'm going to open up my grid here. Something that annoys the crap out of me for some reason is because a triangle is so non-linearly shaped, it always looks off-centered, which in this case it's not, but sometimes it looks off-centered. I always want to like move it over, but that's actually that's not centered. So I'm just going to do a really simple, super easy transition here from a rectangle or from a triangle to a rectangle. And I'm just going to press this button there. And let's see actually what I need to do. So I need to open up this layer, go to contents, I think right click Polystar path and convert to Bezier path. Now here's the tip here. What I just did was made it so now I have a path keyframe that I could set. If you don't have that, you need to hold Alt while creating the shape, and that will give you the path. So now I could just add points onto this triangle like that, and I could set path keyframes. Set a path keyframe there, a path keyframe there, and now I can grab these points. For some reason I can never seem to grab them right, and I can turn this into a rectangle. Bring up my grid. Just like that. And then holding Shift, I'm just going to drag this one over. Just like that. And I don't really love that, if I'm being completely honest, but let's see what else I can do here. Okay, I know what else I can do. Let's try something else. So I don't need that point. I'm going to delete that point and delete that point. And what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to create a point down here and move it to the corner, just like that. Set a path keyframe. Let's try something that looks like this. I didn't hold Shift when I drug this one up. Holding Shift keeps it in a straight line. Just like that. And now I'm going to just create a new rectangle here. Centered up into the composition. I'm also going to make sure this shape is centered up into the composition as well, because I think I might have moved it on accident. And I'm going to make this a matte layer, or a mask layer. Make it alpha inverted. And at this point, or at this point, I'm going to change the scale, unlink it, press J on the keyboard, and make this 0. And there that goes. And now I'm just going to add some motion here and make this happen ultra quick, because it's not really an animation you want to take a while. Just like that. That looks pretty good. So I'm just going to rename this composition to play and pause. Play and pause button. Come over here to my project pane. Just going to place it in my icon, just so in my icons folder, just so I'm sanity check, and move it right into place. So I'm going to continuously rasterize this. I'm going to scale it down and I'm gonna move over in time. So I'm gonna scale this down again, even more. So here is something interesting, okay? Lining up the time when that turns into a play button or a pause button and when the fab button moves is a pain in the neck. So I'm just gonna right click this and go to time, enable time read mapping, and find out exactly when it starts to morph, which is right there. Set a time keyframe. Find when it ends morphing, and set a keyframe. Actually, I don't even need to do that. I don't need to set an end keyframe. And this needs to be centered up better. And at this point is when I need this to hit play. And I could just simply take this and parent it to the FAB button, but only in the position. So actually, if I hit P on the keyboard, holding Alt, set a keyframe, open up the fab button, press P, I could just drag this pick whip for the expression position and it will only take the position information. So there that is. It's pretty neat. And I could even create a layer new null object and now parent this to the null object. I don't want to do that actually. Not going to do that. And that looks pretty good. So it moves right into place. I think this play pause button needs the motion blur. Also, I think that it's happening a little bit too quick, so I'm going to give it a half a second. So someone presses play, and then the animation starts. And also, this needs to have a different color, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure the FAB button in the animation was dark. So I'm just going to search for fill again and add a fill to it. Make it black. Make the transparency, T on the keyboard, to 40. Maybe even 80. Maybe 50. Just like that. To be honest, I think I like it better white. So I'm just gonna leave it white. It's not how Google did it, but Google also doesn't follow this anymore. So I'm the new guy in charge. So okay. So now we can start adding some other effects here. And by the way, where this fab button ends is where that play button ends. So if you do want to change something, you're gonna have to do it with the fab button. So let's say you want this to be down. Make sure the keyframes are lined up. If you want this to be lower, then you're gonna have to do that. But also see here that now the scale, it wasn't quite scaled up enough. So I'd have to increase the scale. Okay. So that looks pretty good. Now I'm just gonna go pull some icons off the internet. If you come here and you just search for Google material design icons. It's a great tool. These are all Google's icons that you could download. And I'm just gonna search for some music type icons. So next, skip next, perfect. I'll take that. In SVG format, that's a vector format. I'll take that. And let's see, I'm gonna show in folder. I'm gonna right click, I'm gonna open it up in Illustrator. Because I don't think that After Effects can use an SVG file. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. So let's see, open with If I could find open with, and open up in Illustrator. Illustrator should open up here in one moment. And it is. And you can tell that that is a teeny tiny icon, but that's okay. Size doesn't matter with vectors. I'm just going to File, Save As. I do have an icons folder. I'm just going to rename this to Skip Next. And I'm going to save it as an Adobe Illustrator file. And now I can just go to that folder on my desktop, or in my, not the desktop obviously, as you can see. I'm just going to open up the assets folder and find Skip Next. Skip Next, and I'm going to need to put it into my project panel. And it will take a couple seconds, and there it is. I'm just going to move it into my icons folder and come and place it right in. Again, it's teeny tiny, so I'm just going to scale it up, make sure it's continually rasterized is on. Placing it onto that layer, now I could use that as a kind of scale. That looks good, and I'm just going to add a fill to it. Make it white. And pulling up my grid again. Make it nice and easy to see where I want this to be. By the way, Illustrator files within After Effects are really slow. If you don't want it to be slow, you could right click this and go to Convert, Create Shapes from Vector Layer, and then delete that Illustrator file, and now it's just a shape layer, which is awesome. What's great about it too is you could open this up, and it has the contents, so it has all of the different pieces. Pro tip. But I'm going to add motion blur, make sure motion blur is turned on. I'm going to hit save, Control S, just to make sure I don't crash. Actually need this grid, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm just going to duplicate this layer, Control D, rotate it 90 or 180, and move it over. So that's 1, 2, 3 shapes, 1, 2, 3. So that looks good. And I'm actually going to scale these down a tad, maybe 350. I don't need them really to be as big and perfectly shaped as that. So I made the same mistake with my grids again. All right, so now we have our skip stuff. And now I'm just going to create a line here showing, how long the song is and where the song is at. So I should probably also animate those in, but I'll animate that in later. Again, this is a pretty long tutorial. I think now we're here at 45 minutes, but it's all fun, right? Said no one ever. Okay, creating text here. Obviously, as it starts, it's at 0, 0. I don't know if it's necessary to have 2 zeros there. And just gonna move that over. Just gonna duplicate this layer, move it over to the other side. And I'm just gonna make up some arbitrary length of the song. 5 minutes and 21 seconds. That probably looks good to me. By the way, I have the same song on repeat and it's been repeating this entire time. So I'm just gonna take 1 second to change the song. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so I have my times and now it's time for my line. Now again, this is all boring, right? I'm just creating shapes. It's not until I start animating all this that you're gonna be like, oh wow, that's totally cool. So let's see. That looks about right, that rectangle. It's a little bit thick, but it hasn't been a problem in the past. Just simply line it up and then center it up. And now I could kind of move these over to make sure these are in the center, split evenly between the side of the panel and the bar. So I'm going to rename this to music bar. Background. Again, I'm going to make sure they all are on motion blur is turned on for all of them. For the fab bar, for the fab button, I can lock it because I don't want to grab it on accident. Same with the play and skip. And it's actually same with the times. So opening up this music bar layer path, I'm just going to uncheck size. So that way I could kind of morph this in whichever way I want. I want it to be nice and thin, like that. And I want it to be rounded on the edges. Why? Well, there's no reason other than it just looks a little bit softer. You can't really tell from here, but that's okay. I'm going to duplicate this layer, rename this to music bar. So the other one's music bar background. This is the music bar. Making that invisible, I'm just going to bring this transparency down to maybe 40, maybe even less. Let's say 25. Let's go crazy. And I'm going crazy. Speaking of going crazy. Okay, so now I have my background there. I'm going to take this music bar, rectangle path, and I'm going to make this size 0. I'm going to change the position, bring it all the way to the end here. That's just about perfect. Set a position and a size keyframe. I should probably take my fab bar button and bring up the keyframes just so I could see them. So maybe at this point I want the music to start. Move those keyframes over. Go to the end. Again, this is only 10-second comp, so it's only 7 seconds. There's not a lot of time going to be going on. I'm just going to increase the size there. Again, these are not scale and position. These are size and position through the rectangle path. If I messed with the size through scaling it, the roundness doesn't stick. Okay, so that's moving how it should. And I'm also going to add a circle, right? So you want to be able to grab the music and change the time. Just creating a circle, centering up this keyframe, and moving this to the end here. Setting a position keyframe. And just rename this to music marker. Set motion blur. Hit K on the keyboard, it'll bounce to that back keyframe. And now I'm just going to move this over. I could link them and do some fancy math like I have in the past. If this was for a customer, I might do that if they wanted to maybe replicate this multiple times over. But for me, I'm just going to set these keyframes. But now I want to animate all this stuff in, right? Because that obviously doesn't look great. So first thing I'm going to do is I kind of feel like the spacing here is a little bit off. So for my Odessa in line of sight, I'm just going to press U on the keyboard and pick up those keyframes. Press J on the keyboard until I find them. Just bring them down a little bit. I think the spacing looks about right. And that probably looks fine. So I'm going to just bring those back down and lock them so I don't accidentally grab them. And let's see, at this time, I want this music button, music marker, to be over here. And I'm going to add the same motion to that. So that way it kind of looks cool, follows the music. And I need the transparency to start here, right? Because I don't want it to come off screen. Set it to 0. And probably no motion needed for that transparency. That probably looks fine. And that looks cool. And very simply, I can... See, I don't want things to come off from off screen because, first of all, I'll have to mask them out, but also because, I don't really like when things just kind of pop out of nowhere. So I'm going to just have these scale up. So set them to 0. Same motion. So maybe I kind of separate these a little bit so it looks a little bit more dynamic. Or do you know what would maybe be cool? What if I linked these two layers to the play and pause button, but with transparency? So oh man. So starting there, I could add some transparency to these. Set keyframes, move this over. Make them 0. I don't know, I don't love that, but it's, yeah, I don't really like that. I'm gonna go back to the scaling, so just Control Z. Make sure all the motion lines up. What I can do also to make this even more dynamic is set position keyframes. Again, I'm just kind of rolling off the cuff here, which might make this tutorial about 500 times longer, but you know, it is what it is. Have them come off from the right, maybe just a little bit, not off screen. Let's not mistake ourselves. So just have a little bit of motion there. That looks cool. Do you know what I should have did? I should have had that top line become that line. Maybe in the future I would change that. But how do I bring this stuff into focus? I mean, very simple thing I can do is take the times here and the music bars. For that case, these skips, Control Shift C, pre-comp these into play post fab buttons. Duplicate the fab button, put it above those, and use it as a mask. Just like that. That looks pretty cool. And I'm just gonna these next but things. These keyframes are done. I don't need those. I don't want them anymore. So you can see there won't be any motion now. Just like that. Pretty simple. Now I guess the final touch I can do is look at this and say, do I want this time to change with the music? And I could, but to rig it up perfectly, it would be hard, but I'm going to use the cheapskate route, which would probably include me opening up this. And this is where things get complicated. I would let me try to explain this the best that I could. I would use the source text with a scale. You know, I'll just put on screen a tutorial on how you should do that if you want to do that. You could follow the tutorial. It's really simple, but there's a couple steps. But I would do that. It's a whole tutorial in itself. It would take another 20 minutes, but I don't think it's necessary for this. I think that looks pretty freaking cool, if you ask me. I could do some stuff with the album artwork, but I don't think that it's completely necessary. The only thing I do think is necessary is I think that this prefab list, I think that this A Moment Apart is too close to the Odessa, and that looks better. But other than that, I think that looks pretty freaking cool. And you should definitely check out Odessa's album. They didn't sponsor me. I wish they would. Maybe give me free tickets. And yeah, I hope you like that. I know it took way longer than it probably should have, but it's just one of those things that animations just take time, and it's just gotta hand do it. So anyways, guys, I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please give it a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.